Coming up on Focus, Black Oklahoma. Brandy Colbert's book, Blackbirds in the Sky, is sparking important conversation in the classroom about the tough topic of the Tulsa Race Massacre.
We'll also have the first in a series on candidates running for political office across the state.
We'll hear from an organization helping to counteract adverse childhood experiences affecting millions of Oklahomans.
We connect the dots from Dragon Ball Z to NERD, exploring how Black nerds are gaining greater visibility and acceptance in mainstream culture.
What makes the prairie chicken different from the bald eagle? We'll hear from researchers, indigenous communities, and journalists hoping to preserve the prairie system and these iconic birds.
After 101 years, the 3 remaining survivors of the 1921 Tulsa Race Massacre will finally be granted a trial that provides hope to those who are fighting to repair and restore Greenwood. All this and more on Focus, Black Oklahoma.
Focus Black Oklahoma is sponsored by Phillips Seminary, with video of the Tulsa Race Massacre annual lectureship from the author of Lynched, The Power of Memory in a Culture of Terror. Online at ptstulsa.edu/lectures.
This is Focus Black Oklahoma. I'm Kuma Roberts.
And I'm Colby Webster.
After numerous attempts by the survivors of the 1921 Tulsa Race Massacre to be granted a trial, a judge handed down an unprecedented ruling on May 2nd that provides hope to those who are fighting to repair and restore Greenwood. Carlos Moreno has more.
We're going to get justice for Greenwood. We're going to vindicate our ancestors. We're going to get justice for Greenwood. We're going to get justice for Greenwood. We're going to get justice for Greenwood.
That's attorney Demario Solomon Simmons at the Tulsa County Courthouse.
We want to find out where these mass graves are around the city. We want to know everything that happened with the massacre. There's never been a judicial account exactly of what happened with this massacre. We want to know. We're going to find out.
Solomon Simmons represents the 3 living survivors of the 1921 Tulsa Race Massacre and the descendants of those who have passed since the destruction of the Greenwood community 101 years ago.
History was made today. I want to first start out by thanking my incredible team who have worked tirelessly on this case. But they stood, and we all stood on the shoulders of the ancestors who started fighting for Greenwood on May 31st, 1921, and continue to fight, filing lawsuits. The next day, June 2nd, Attorney Franklin, working out of a tent, fighting for Greenwood, starting from them. We are standing on the shoulders of all those ancestors who have passed on. To seek and feel this victory is amazing. We have a lot of work to do, but nobody in the country has ever gotten this far.
In the days following the massacre, Buck Colbert Franklin, an attorney who had moved to Tulsa from Rentisville, Oklahoma just 3 months prior, sued the city of Tulsa, Mayor T.D. Evans, and the city commission for changing the city's fire code, effectively preventing Greenwood residents from rebuilding their neighborhood. He and fellow attorneys I.H. Spears and P.A. Chappelle succeeded in arguing that Greenwood had the right to rebuild. However, the violence and destruction of the massacre itself has never been litigated. Over 200 lawsuits filed by business owners in Greenwood seeking compensation for damages from the city of Tulsa and insurance companies were dismissed in 1937. 64 years later, in 2001, the state of Oklahoma released a report detailing the history of the Greenwood neighborhood and the extent of its destruction. In 2003, Harvard Law professor Charles J. Ogletree, attorney Johnny Cochran, and Franklin's son, Dr. John Hope Franklin, filed a lawsuit seeking justice for nearly 150 massacre survivors. The lawsuit was dismissed by the Supreme Court in 2005. Christy Williams, a Greenwood descendant and Creek freedman, expressed the difficulties of advocating for her community as she has seen previous lawsuits fail.
The survivors, they get to prove their case. Like, we've never been able to go to trial, since the beginning. And I think people sometimes get that confused, like when they saw when Johnny Cochran was here, but they were just trying to get a trial. But the Supreme Court said that too long had passed. So this is a big thing.
Attorney Simmons feels the sense of urgency in seeking justice for the 3 remaining survivors of the massacre: Leslie Benningfield Mother Randall, Viola Ford Fletcher, and Hugh's Uncle Red Van Ellis.
First of all, it's been over 100 years. Let's start there.
Yeah.
And then you have three individuals that are 101 plus, 107 plus, and one will be 108 on May 10th. We want them to see justice in their lifetime. I personally have seen so many survivors die in my 20 plus years working on this issue. I just don't want to see the last three die without justice. So that's why the time is of the essence.
Attorney and United States Representative Sheila Jackson Lee from the 18th Congressional District in Texas is the sponsor of House Resolution 40, which calls for the creation of an expert panel to study the legacy of slavery and consider reparations for Black Americans.
And so, Oklahoma, I just want to say thank you. I will tell your story on the floor of the House. Thank you. I will hope to send a message to Republicans and Democrats that repair is not an ugly word, that restore is a legitimate concept. We may start here with Greenwood, document it, and who knows where else we may go.
And for now, advocates will continue this 101-year-old fight for justice, locally and worldwide.
Justice for Greenwood! Justice for Greenwood! Justice for Greenwood! Justice for Greenwood!
For Focus Black Oklahoma, I'm Carlos Moreno in Tulsa.
This is the first in a series exploring the candidates running for political office across the state. Jamie Glisson speaks with Congressional District 3 incumbent Congressman Frank Lucas and some new challengers for that seat.
This June, Oklahoma voters will go to the polls to decide which candidates from their affiliated political parties will make it on the ballot this November. Several races across the state have drawn double-digit competition. Congressional District 3, the largest district in our state, is led by the incumbent Congressman Frank Lucas. Lucas, a fifth-generation Oklahoman, has served as this district's congressman since 1994. In the current election cycle, he has two opponents in the primary on June 28th, Wade Burleson and Steve Butler, as well as the Democratic candidate Jeremiah Ross. As Congressman Lucas was preparing to walk in the Classic Bowl Parade in Woodward, he took a few minutes to discuss the great state of Oklahoma. When asked about Oklahoma's gun laws, Frank immediately advocated for the people of CD3 and their strong support of the Second Amendment.
We've had tragedies in Oklahoma, just like the rest of the country, and this epidemic of tragedies, the taking of innocence, doesn't seem to be slowing down. But right now, as of this moment, my constituents are more concerned about having their rights taken away by the federal government than they are anything else when it comes to the Second Amendment debate. And it's really strong feeling in the 3rd District of Oklahoma.
Congressman Lucas had this to say regarding Michael Lewis, the shooter at Tulsa's St. Francis Hospital, purchasing his rifle less than 1 hour before murdering 4 people.
Clearly, I think that's a legitimate issue. I was also concerned when I realized that it was someone who had been a medical procedure patient who clearly felt he had a vendetta against his doctor. And we'll ultimately discover just what all was really going on there. But these are the kind of issues that you can't just address in the heat of the moment. You got to rationally think them through, because if you make changes in federal law, which affect changes in state law, impact potential constitutional issues, those changes sometimes are for decades, years, or maybe forever. We have to be thoughtful. But are the tragedies coming too fast? Are they terrible? Are they horrible? Do they pull at my heartstrings? I think, like every other Oklahoman, we would all agree, yes, it's horrible.
Every Saturday morning when not in session, Cheyenne residents can find Frank at the local trading post, sipping coffee and talking all things Oklahoma.
We're agriculture, we're energy, and we're Main Street business. Whether it's the main streets of Woodward, or Boise City, or South Oklahoma City, I work very hard on the things that make a difference in the lives of my constituents. I've written one farm bill and been around for numerous farm bills. producing the safety net that helps my people on the farm deal with things they cannot control. World prices, weather patterns, they can't control that. So having crop insurance and price protection where they pay a premium to have some safety net helps make sure that we raise the food and fiber that everybody gets to enjoy in the United States and around the world. On the energy side, we are oil and gas, we are wind. My constituents are concerned that President Biden and the present leadership of the United States House and Senate, by trying to drive us away from traditional energy like oil and gas before we're prepared for whatever comes next, is going to only create higher prices, and we're seeing that now. Bottom line is this: we can't have the federal government do everything for everybody all the time, but it's my responsibility to make sure the federal government doesn't hurt my people. And I'm trying, and have for a long time, and my folks have been very responsive to my efforts.
Once the parade started, Frank walked behind a truck full of giggling children and their parents, wearing Lucas for Congress t-shirts. Along the way, constituents jumped out of line to thank him and shake his hand. One said she had been, quote, helping to get Frank elected since 1994, end quote. While another parade goer was just excited to see an old friend and turned it into a teaching moment as she introduced Frank to her grandchildren.
Hey, Frank. He's your representative to the U.S. Congress. That's good.
About 90 miles away, down U.S. Highway 412, I met up with Wade Burleson at Astoria Ministries, his 501c3 nonprofit that serves as an educational and religious charity in Enid. Wade and I got right down to business. After sharing a little of his background as a former chaplain for the Tulsa Police Department, we moved to gun control.
From 1987 to 1992, I lived in Tulsa. My district was South Tulsa, so I was at crime scenes. Had I been in Tulsa at the shooting, that would have been my district. And I can't tell you how many crime scenes I've been to, and my job was to identify victims and notify next of kin. And one of the most gut-wrenching was 4 children who had been killed by their father, and he hung himself in the closet, and the mother came in while I was in the back bedroom with the dead children. She broke through the police line. I heard the screaming as she came in through the house, and then it's something that you never forget. I'm a historian. I study the Constitution. I write about the history of Oklahoma. And the Second Amendment is the only amendment that has this phrase: it shall not be infringed upon. I told you about that crime scene with 4 dead children. They were killed with a pillow. I've always been of the opinion that guns don't kill people. Evil people kill people. Now, I do understand the argument that guns make it easier for evil people to kill more people. I get that. But if you're truly evil and criminal, you're going to do whatever you want to do.
Mr. Burleson said he would consider raising the age of being able to purchase a gun to 21, but only if the age to vote and join the military were also raised. He echoed Congressman Lucas's stance on making sweeping gun law decisions when emotions are high. Wade said, quote, "We need to discuss these things dispassionately using logic and principle, not emotion," end quote.
Now get this. This blows people's minds. Kids brought their rifles to school. They had gun practice in the 50s. Now, can you imagine that? What has changed from the 50s to the 2020s? So I think culture has changed. The solution, it's worthy to talk about.
I asked Mr. Burleson for clarity on what he feels this change would look like.
I think things do need to change, but not with guns. I think things need to change in the classroom. I think we need to start teaching virtue and character and what I call the laws of nature and of nature's God. And when I say I call it, that's what our founders call it. So this wouldn't be religious instruction. This would be constitutional instruction. And so we must ask ourselves the question, what are the laws of nature? Because we quote that, but nobody knows what they are. And it's really simple. You go outside and look at nature, and you don't see mama birds kicking their babies in the form of their eggs out of the nest or eating their own eggs. You don't see that in nature. You don't see in nature two steers procreating in order to have a calf. I'm against the government intruding into a home and telling someone how to live. My homosexual friends should be able to live in freedom. But I think when we celebrate something that violates the laws of nature, I think we've lost our sense of virtue and character. And so I think that's where you start, is in the classroom. And when that happens, then you don't have this wild, anything goes, I'll do what I want, and if you cross me, I will kill you type of mentality. And that's what we've got right now.
On the topic of the constituents of Congressional District 3 and their rural needs, Mr. Burleson explained the changes his district went through after the 2020 census.
We're more urban now than rural. It used to be rural, but they gerrymandered in West Tulsa and they gerrymandered in South Oklahoma City. And we have now crossed 50% urban, which is a little unusual, okay? So it's half and half. But you're right, there's a lot of farms. There's a lot of small communities. How is it different? Well, land is everything to Western Oklahoma. A lot of people own land. 10 acres, 5 acres, 40 acres, 400 acres, 1,000 acres, 10,000 acres. Okay, here's what I believe I can do. The federal government is encroaching. That means they're trespassing on private land and waters of Western Oklahoma through the federal government in the name of the environment. 2,000 alphabet soup agencies, that means USDA, FDA, EPA, run by unelected bureaucrats that aren't accountable to the people, come into Oklahoma and trespass, encroach on land.
Burleson's thoughts on the need for federal regulation were unique.
Farmers, ranchers, cattlemen, oil, gas producers in Western Oklahoma, they are exceptional. If they do bad business, they're going to be driven out of business. They are exceptional in what they do. They're the best. The federal government needs to stop mandating, controlling, overregulating Oklahoma.
The final Republican candidate for Congressional District 3 is Mr. Steve Butler. Mr. Butler has owned his own business for over 30 years. He admits he doesn't have experience in bureaucracy, but is ready to step up to the challenge.
I mean, like I said, I don't have any experience at this. The reason I'm running is because I'm tired of career politicians, and I think regular people have to step up and start running against them. That's the only way we're going to get rid of them. And Frank Lucas is one of those guys. I'm sure he's a fine man, but he's been there almost 30 years. And, we just need something different, I believe.
When it comes to Second Amendment rights, all three candidates have a similar stance. However, Butler's stance on government regulations is quite different. First, you'll hear Butler discuss Second Amendment rights and then government entities.
You can put gun control all day long, and these crazy people are still going to get guns, and they're still going to use them. So to me, the only thing to do that is, I'll go back to the NRA. The only thing that stops a bad guy with a gun is a good guy with a gun. I'm a regular person, and I've met, I'm a small businessman. I've produced my own income for 30 years, and I know what it's like to try to work for yourself and get things done. I think we have too much government regulation, so they need to back off on that. I would really work hard to make that happen, too.
Butler clarified his opinions regarding government entities, such as the USDA, dealing with food production.
No, we have to look out for our food supply and stuff. I'm referring more to like the FBI, which they've weaponized lately. And, we have all these government law enforcement agencies that are starting to come back and be used on the people rather than, protecting the people like they were designed to do.
The final candidate in the race for Congressional District 3 is Jeremiah Ross. Mr. Ross is a United States veteran, has worked in the oil and gas industry, and is the former Assistant District Attorney for the Osage Nation. Currently, Mr. Ross practices law as a defense and personal injury attorney. He brought up a recent opinion piece in favor of the incumbent Frank Lucas that was published in the Tulsa World. According to Ross, the 5-paragraph op-ed article references only one thing that Lucas has done to benefit his constituents.
People could refer to and say, this is what our guy's been doing, but every time I ask anyone, it's Oklahoma City, Enid, Altus, who's your representative? Oh, Republican guy. 30 years and nobody knows his name. Now, a handful of folks think that's a positive thing. Oh, he's not a headliner. He's not going to cause you any problems. Well, he still voted to overturn the election. It's not as if he's got some core principle that is leading his decision-making. No, he just does what he's told. He lives in the shadow. It's that simple.
Ross expressed his ideas on gun laws and referenced the recent mass shooting in Tulsa.
What would have prevented the St. Francis situation is a waiting period. I know when I purchased my own gun, I had to wait, I want to believe, 7 days. I have to double check, but I mean, the idea that anyone can walk into a gun store and purchase a automatic rifle, no less, much more powerful, damage controlled from a rifle as opposed to a pistol. So that right there, a waiting period off the bat. Then you increase the age. Why does an 18-year-old have to have a semi-automatic rifle? Well, a lot of people are saying, well, if you can join the military at 18, you can have a rifle. Well, guess what? I joined the military at 17, and they don't issue you a rifle when you join the military. They teach you how to use it. They make you carry it around every day, everywhere you go, clean it for weeks before you ever get to shoot it.
Jeremiah also detailed his plans for District 3.
So, in my opinion, one of the best things you could do as a federal legislator is to actually advocate on behalf of the rural community, not simply take what is doled out to the state of Oklahoma, which is what Mr. Lucas did. He voted against this most recent infrastructure bill that allotted approximately $4.9 billion to the state of Oklahoma. And I do know he's got a list of projects, submitted to him from the various communities within District 3, bridges, intersections, off-ramps, exit ramps, things of that nature. But when you look at the gentleman who's representing you and he's voting against the legislation that's going to divvy up how much money we receive, how can you assume that he's got as much money as we could possibly get? Or his advocacy, what is it doing on our behalf when he's over here saying, yeah, sure, whatever we get, I'll throw some your way, but I'm not going to do anything to ensure the passage of this law. So if we got 4.9 million with every federal representative voting against the law and basically removing themselves from the negotiation process that pertains to the bridges being fixed, the interstates, we are like a centrally located hub for traffic, highway traffic, interstate highway traffic, I-40, I-35, the turnpikes, 412. So it's like all these go through District 3. If anyone should be on the trail from here to D.C. collecting, advocating on behalf of District 3, it's Mr. Lucas, but he's voting against the legislation.
This month, Republicans across CD3 will choose the candidate whose name will be on the ballot in November against Democrat Jeremiah Ross. Will it be Frank Lucas, the longtime politician that sips coffee and talks shop with his people? Retired Pastor Wade Burleson, who prioritizes a complete deregulation of the federal government? Or the blue-collar, small business owner Steve Butler, who thinks the people of District 3 need someone that doesn't know what it's like to work in Washington? Will Oklahomans side with the steady, familiar choice or an out-of-the-box alternative? For Focus Black Oklahoma, I'm Jamie Glisson in Woodward.
You're listening to Focus Black Oklahoma. Adverse childhood experiences are responsible for traumatizing millions of children across the state. One organization believes that a mentor can counteract that trauma with an activity as simple as bowling. Dawn Carter shares more about Big Brothers Big Sisters Bowling for Kids' Sake event.
If kids are constantly under stress because of not just little stresses in their lives, but big things, being the victim of abuse or neglect, not having enough food in the family, having domestic violence in the family, even if they're not the direct victims of it, having a parent who's incarcerated, having a caregiver who is too drunk or too high to care for their needs. Those are not just your typical stresses that come and go. Those keep a child's brain and body at a constant heightened state.
That's Nellie Kelly, Tulsa Area Director for Big Brothers Big Sisters. And the situations she just named are referred to as ACEs, or Adverse Childhood Experiences, which, according to the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, or CDC, have a tremendous impact on future violence victimization, perpetration, and lifelong health and opportunity.
It even affects our very DNA as far as the illnesses that we develop. So we know that the kids in Oklahoma have very high rates of trauma, and particularly the kids in our program. They are at very high risk. Now, here is the good news for all of that bad news. The good news is that research is showing that the best way to counteract that trauma is a mentor.
A solution: Big Brothers Big Sisters mentorship. And bowling. Wait, bowling? Yes, bowling. Their grassroots fundraising campaign called Bowl for Kids' Sake.
All the money stays local, and this is a way for people who want to support mentorship to raise money. So everybody raises $150, and then the celebration party is in July, and it's a bowling party. Really, the idea behind it is raising money for Big Brothers Big Sisters to help promote that cause of mentorship. And you can do that any way you want to. You can have a raffle. You can have a yard sale at your house. You can have a jeans day at your work and have everybody pay $5 to wear jeans that day at work. And it can be a lot of fun. We've got littles currently on our waiting list, girls and boys, who are waiting for a big. There's no doubt that kids need us. Nobody would doubt that mentorship is a good thing. Something simple like spending time with a child, that is what they need.
That's exactly what Jaden Patrick, former Big Brother mentee, now 19, says that he experienced with his mentor Grant firsthand.
I think it was around like 5th or 6th grade, but right off the bat, they were like, they were kind and loving. He used to play offensive lineman in college, so he has that bigger stature. But he's a great role model. His unconditional love for my family and I, the love he shows his wife, like is a great example of what a man should be. And I feel like everybody needs a person like Grant in their life. What I've learned from him is to not be afraid to try new things, because when I'm with them, we're always doing something different, always finding something new to do, whether it's like going to go find a different restaurant to eat at, trying new skills, even he helped me, him and his wife both helped me. I was at their house for like 2 weeks straight studying for the ACT.
When asked if there was anything he would like to share from his heart about Big Brothers and Big Sisters, Jaden had this to say.
Honestly, I got one thing, and it's just a big thank you for, pairing me with such amazing people like Grant and Bethany, because honestly, I have no idea where I would be in life without them. The amount of things that they have done for me is just is, I can't even like put into words. I love them so much. And thank you, big brothers and big sisters, for everything you've done for us. And, I can't wait to be a part of it in the future.
For more information about the Bowl for Kids' Sake campaign, visit www.tulsaforkidssake.org. To sign up for Big Brother, Big Sister mentoring program, to be a big or a little, visit www.bigoklahoma.org. For Focus, Black Oklahoma, in Okmulgee, I'm Don Carter.
Brandy Colbert's book, Blackbirds in the Sky, was written for young adults but doesn't shy away from the tough topic of the Tulsa Race Massacre. Our team correspondent, Adrienne Brown, has details about what's been missing from her education and why straight talk in our classrooms matter.
I kind of heard something about the Race Massacre maybe a few years ago. I can't remember exactly when, and remember looking up some things about it and thinking, well, that's pretty terrible. But not thinking much about why I hadn't been taught. It was just like another part of Black history that I hadn't been taught.
Brandy Colbert is an award-winning author of books for young adults. Her recent nonfiction book, Blackbirds in the Sky, covers the 1921 Tulsa Race Massacre. She connects that tragedy to this country's long history of white violence, from our country's earliest days through Reconstruction, the Civil Rights Movement, and up to today's fight for justice. But the problem Colbert remembers from her childhood, the lack of Black history education, is still around. One Tulsa student, Smriti Iyengar, believes that this education is still needed. She just finished 9th grade at Booker T. Washington High School.
I went to U School, which was like a smaller, it was a private school, so it was like a lot of the people there were richer, and I didn't know it existed until like 7th grade, whenever people started talking about it outside of school, and that's when they brought it like into school. So I barely knew anything about it for like 7th and 8th grade, and it was only really when I like educated myself about it on like online and stuff. I didn't learn about it that much at school, and so when I went to Booker T, they went into definitely like so much more detail than I learned in U School.
Smriti's classmate, Paris Bedford, had a different learning experience. She attended a school that was open to teaching Tulsa's dark history.
I went to Carver, so we talked about it tremendously. We spent about a month on it, a little bit over a month maybe. We went on tours. We had people come to talk to us at the school. I feel like primarily part of that was because we are in the Greenwood district and we are a primarily Black school. I don't think other schools are getting quite educated on it.
Brandy says this miseducation is a long-term problem. Here in Tulsa, the Tulsa Race Massacre was labeled a riot for decades.
Race riots were used for so long. And, one thing I cover in the book is that race riots were classifying them as race riots. The insurance companies, that was a way for them to not have to pay out any reparations for the property and, lives that were lost.
Mislabeling what happened a century ago is a form of injustice, one that irritates students like Paris even today.
It kind of angers me, as well as the Tulsa Race Riot, because they couldn't, get their insurance, and stuff like that. So it was just hateful, and it's sickening to think about.
How can writers fight these injustices with their words? Brandy argues we need to call things by their names.
I don't believe in dumbing down my books for anyone just because they're younger, no matter what age. I do think there are certain concepts and certain language that maybe need to be adjusted. But in this case, I thought, we're talking about something really real, something that really happened and affected a lot of people and is still affecting, a whole city today. And so I just thought, I'm just going to tell it like it is.
Students like Paris are into this approach.
The matter of being comfortable isn't really a concern. It's not a comfortable topic, and it's not supposed to be a comfortable topic. It's not supposed to be a censored topic. So I feel like we've grown up and lived in this society that it needs to be censored, traumatic things like this, which of course in some cases it is necessary, but to be worried about offending somebody about not opinion but fact shouldn't really be a concern.
And for Smriti, part of telling the truth about Greenwood involves celebrating its achievements.
I think it was a really tragic event. It was terrible, like the massacre, but it also it helps us realize that Black Wall Street was a really big part of the city. Like back then, it was really cool because especially in 1921 there were Jim Crow laws and lynchings all across the country. And it was like they managed to make this whole Greenwood district so prosperous and so amazing by themselves. Like they were self-sufficient, and they managed to do that right in the middle of Oklahoma. And it's amazing how they managed to do that.
You're never too young to begin learning about the massacre. And Brandy Colbert's Blackbirds in the Sky is a great place to start. For Focus Black Oklahoma, I'm Adrienne Brown in Tulsa.
Preserving the prairie system is no simple task. And now, at the heart of conservation and culture, is the prairie chicken. While it may not be as familiar as bald eagles, Brittany Cordera has more on what makes prairie chickens just as iconic and in need of protection.
A group of 15 journalists and 4 scientists spent 2 Saturdays in March in search of prairie chickens on their booming grounds, also called leks. One Saturday at Atwater Wildlife Refuge outside of Houston, Texas, and the next in Marion County, Illinois. These birds are important because of the stories indigenous people passed down about them, as well as their mating dance that is mimicked by men at powwows. The prairie chicken dance is a men's warrior ritual from the Blackfoot, Plains Cree, and Siksika First Nation. Stories of the prairie chicken originate from Alberta, Canada. The men's regalia is colorful with bright red, yellow, orange, and blue, adorned with feathers and round bustles. Freddie Gipp, an enrolled member of the Apache Tribe of Oklahoma, and founder and CEO of Lead Horse LLC, an art, entertainment, and recreation company, recounts the story.
It was of a young boy, who ventured off and he hunted a prairie chicken, and the prairie chicken came to him in his dreams and showed him, while he was coming onto the chicken, he saw the chicken doing the booming dance, dancing and very, emulating, the style and everything. And then that individual took its life. And then so when you take its life, that's a very big responsibility, especially in our world. That chicken came back to him and shared, asked him why did he take him? Why did he kill him? Why did he take his life? And then the boy shared, because we were hungry. And then in return, the chicken said, well, if you're going to do that, then you have to share this dance with everybody, or else, there will be consequences.
On June 1st, United States Fish and Wildlife Service was supposed to determine the final listing of the lesser prairie chicken. The determination is still pending. The key issue is that in 2014, lesser prairie chicken was added to the federal list of endangered and threatened wildlife as threatened, but was removed from the list after a 2016 court ruling. Sometime this summer, a decision will be made to list lesser prairie chicken in northwest Oklahoma and in the Panhandle as endangered, giving the bird maximum amount of attention and protection like its bigger cousin, the Atwater's prairie chicken, a subspecies of greater prairie chicken along the Texas coastal plains. Stacia Whitaker is the wildlife management biologist for the Department of Conservation, based in El Dorado Springs, Missouri.
Mainly what I manage around here are prairies, and one of those being one of the largest intact prairies left in southwest Missouri, managed in partnership with the Nature Conservancy, and that is Wakanta Prairie. I also oversee management at Taborville Prairie, Osage Prairie, Monegaw Prairie, and a portion of our Linscomb conservation area, which is in a grasslands renovation project right now. So we're trying to expand grasslands where it makes sense.
Don Wolf, lesser prairie chicken biologist and conservationist at the George Mitch Sutton Avian Research Center, says fencing is the biggest concern for lesser prairie chicken in Oklahoma's Panhandle, like in Beaver and Harper counties.
When they're being pursued by
a predator, a raptor, falcons or other aerial predators, they tend to fly low and fast and try to look for cover to escape into. And, and when I say fast, I'm talking in excess of 60 miles an hour. Hitting a fence at that speed is, a lot of birds die outright right there. We found decapitated birds. We found birds with, extensive damage to their bodies or to their wings. And over 40% of the radioed birds that we tracked until they died were a result of fence collisions.
According to the World Wildlife Foundation, listing an animal under the Endangered Species Act is very effective at preventing extinction. If these protections are granted to the lesser prairie chicken, this would prohibit the harming or killing of the bird, ban the import or export of them, require protection of critical habitat space, and necessitate the development and implementation of recovery plans. Ross Heyer, Vice President, Secretary, and Archivist of the Minnesota Prairie Chicken Society, says a lot of politicians despise the Endangered Species Act.
Especially a lot of people on the right side of the political spectrum, because once a species reaches that threatened or endangered status, it kicks in all kinds of safeguards or movements that are frankly going to cost people money, or somebody's going to have to pay to try to improve things for that species. That's why it's such an important act in my mind.
The ultimate goal for conservationists is to keep species off that list, though. And in Oklahoma, Wolf has tagged over 1,000 birds, marked hundreds of miles of fencing for lesser prairie chicken to see, and removed miles of non-usable fencing.
So we're always been looking for that perfect medium with something that's effective enough but not overly expensive to do. We came up with a method here of using the trim strips from vinyl house siding, and we were able to cut those into about 2.5 to 3 inch wide pieces, and using about 2,000 pieces per mile to mark fences out in western Oklahoma. We marked about 370 miles of fence. We've also removed about 150 miles of unessential fence. This is almost entirely on private lands, a little bit on a couple of wildlife management areas, but the overwhelming majority was on private lands.
The prairie chicken mating dance is not only important to the culture of Siksika, Blackfoot, Plains Cree, and other First Nations of Canada and the Great Plains, but also brings awareness to the endangered prairie ecosystem, of which only 1% of 142 million acres remain. Despite the massive destruction humans have caused to their habitat in the United States, community members, conservationists, and biologists give hope to the survival of this unique bird. From Focus Black Oklahoma, I'm Brittany Cordera in Bartlesville.
You're listening to Focus Black Oklahoma. For our next story, Chaz Stevens will connect the dots from Dragon Ball Z to NERD, exploring how black nerds are gaining greater visibility and acceptance in mainstream culture.
If you've ever heard the song Chum by Earl Sweatshirt, there's a line that goes, "Too black for the white kids and too white for the blacks." This lyric always comes to mind when I see Oreos, because I, like most kids who belong to a group of black children who identify as nerds. We were the kids who were into anime, comics, sci-fi, history, and so much more. We were the kids who were excited to watch Toonami on Friday nights, and if we were lucky enough, we were the kids who watched Adult Swim. Watching these stories of heroes physically fighting evil and saving the day, but unlike the superhero and comic books, these heroes created new stories that have never been seen before, and some of them even had games. Yu-Gi-Oh! And Pokemon cards created black markets and under playground duels trying to send our opponents to the Shadow Realms. My friends and I were always excited to show off our card collections in elementary and middle school, but when high school came around, I noticed how something we thought was cool has seen as childish now, dated, but most of all, white. I then found myself as the one black kid amongst a sea of white nerds. I was the black friend in my Yu-Gi-Oh club, the black friend in my Magic the Gathering club, and the black friend in my Pokemon crew. With the rise of superhero movies and television shows in the last decade, fandom has exploded with comics, anime, and cosplaying become as mainstream as hip-hop and sports in a society that is becoming more connected and allowing nerds to create their own seats to tables to which they were never invited to long ago. Now, Merriam-Webster defines the word nerd as, quote, a person devoted to intellectual, academic, or technical pursuits or interests, end quote. But I think that the definition is so formal in that it doesn't really include the fun social context of being a nerd. So, I think a definition that Urban Dictionary contributor Hawaiian Punch 1 penned is far more appropriate. They write, quote, a studious and smart person who gets made fun of by haters, end quote. So, if being a nerd means you're smart and have plenty of haters, why do black kids feel afraid to speak up and boast about their love of things outside of the defined culture? I met and spoke with Daniel Parham, owner and operator of Dragon Slayer Games based in Tulsa, and Smiley Elmore III, a contributor for the black-owned fandom social media app called QuirkChat. Black men growing up as black nerds are now using their platforms here in Oklahoma to open the door for more black youth to explore and discover their inner nerds and create their own paths. The first experience of black nerdom for America was watching Chris Rock's hit show, Everybody Hates Chris. In the show, we follow a young, nerdy Chris Rock growing up in the 80s. In the episode, quote, Everybody Hates Basketball, end quote, he is recruited to play on the basketball team because he was black. But when he plays in his first game, it is quickly revealed that he cannot play. In another episode, it is revealed that Chris was great at something else, the arcade game in his local bodega, Asteroid Stars. This moment in television let us know that we don't have to be rappers or hoopers, but we can truly be nerds. In the time of segregation, social clubs were exclusive and created the stigmas of what is white and what is black. Golf, rowing, and of course card games have never been seen as activities that have had open arms towards black participants. Parham of Dragon Slayer Games says the community hasn't always been welcoming.
It's more like you shouldn't be playing these games if you are a minority. Well, actually, a minority that is doesn't fit that stereotype. When you're not seen as smart, you're not seen as capable, you're seen as, oh, well, you should be out there doing, sports or something else. You shouldn't be here.
Nerds use their imaginations to create realms that help them take a break from the real world. In between avoiding police brutality, losing our native sisters, and praying for those at the border, Black, Indigenous, people of color communities need escapism more than ever. Black parents have a crucial role cultivating the next generation of nerds. A common theme amongst Black nerds is that our family members aren't always supportive of the things that they align with Black culture. Black parents are not a monolith either, but the common idea of what is white people stuff usually has a common denominator. The idea of magic or witchcraft is usually the barrier that nerds like Elmore recalls.
My dad didn't like reading comic books and stuff. Like, as long as I was reading, he really liked that. But like, my dad didn't even let us watch Avatar: The Last Airbender because he thought it was like demonic, So yeah. Pokemon, everyone and their mama, you haven't seen Harry Potter? No, I haven't seen Harry Potter. My dad was a pastor.
Which aligns with the Pew Research Center that says 79% of Black Americans identify as Christian, which creates barriers for those with religious parents, such as Smiley, to begin with his quest as a nerd. These barriers could be the reason why a kid never branches out and tries new things. The ideas of Blackness being a monolith is detrimental for how Black youth sees themselves, which could affect how others saw our children. When Hawaiian Punch 1 wrote the definition of nerd, they didn't say anything about race, gender, age, social class, or any other societal label. With voices like Daniel and Smiley, it seems that the future of black nerds in Oklahoma won't have to worry about too much. The identity of a nerd is far more complex than comic books and video games. The notion that these nerdoms are more linked to white and Asian cultures should be erased from our way of thinking. Instead, we should sit back and allow black people the opportunity to be free with their expressions without ridicule. Without black nerds, we would never see colors when listening to rap punk band NERD. I mean, would Superman be as cool if NBA's champion Shaquille O'Neal never played as Steel? And most definitely not former President Obama. Hopefully, we no longer see Oreos as black on the outside and white on the inside, but instead, we see it as the mediocre, old-fashioned, flavorless cookie it is. For Focus, Black Oklahoma, I'm Chaz Stevens in Turley.
Focus Black Oklahoma is produced in partnership with KOSU Radio, Tulsa Artist Fellowship, and Tri-City Collective. Additional support is provided by the George Kaiser Family Foundation, the Charles and Lynn Schusterman Family Philanthropies, and the Zero Families Foundation. Our theme music is by Moffat Music. Focus Black Oklahoma's executive producers are Quraish Ali Lansana and Bracken Clark. Our producers are Nick Alexandrov and Vanessa Gaona. Our production interns are Smriti Iyengar and Torin Das. Visit us online at kosu.org, tricitycollective.com/FocusBlackOklahoma, and YouTube at Tri-City Collective. You can follow us on Instagram and Twitter at FocusBlackOK. You can hear Focus Black Oklahoma on demand for free at kosu.org, NPR One, NPR.org, or wherever you get your podcasts.
Did you know KOSU accepts vehicles as a form of support? You get a tax deduction, and we'll take care of the rest. Visit kosu.org or call 855-277-2346.